Hello and welcome to the Virginia Solar Summit live stream. I'm your host, Dan French. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. The Virginia Solar Summit live stream is recorded before a live participatory audience. Thank you. Thanks to those of you who are joining us live today. Plug into the Renaissance, connect with pros, and participate in the next episode on our website, virginiasolarsummit.com/livestream. The Virginia Solar Summit is a diverse community of solar energy, real estate, environment, and economic development professionals, and we are produced in collaboration with a diversity of organizations united by a common goal: to catalyze a solar power renaissance in Greater Virginia that re-energizes our economies, revitalizes our communities, and restores our environment. The collaborative organizations behind the Virginia Solar Summit include Appalachian Voices, the Virginia Department of Energy, the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, and the Western Virginia Brownfields Assistance Center at West Virginia University. We are substantively focused on the development of solar energy, tactically focused on land use and redevelopment, geographically concerned with Virginia and West Virginia, and regionally oriented towards similar solar development across all of Appalachia. We organize a market-making, groundbreaking, and always entertaining event, the Virginia Solar Summit, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one in Richmond, April 26th, 27th, and 28th. Plug into the Renaissance and learn more on our website, virginiasolarsummit.com. On today's episode, special guest, David Peterson, Executive Director of Shine, which you can see there. We are brought to you by Dominion Energy, leveraging innovation for a clean energy future. #actions speak louder. Learn more at dominionenergy.com. As well as Mission Disposal, the essential site services company specializing in day-to-day supply and sanitation needs during solar and commercial construction. Learn more on their website, missiondisposal.com. And thanks to all of our sponsors, Dominion Energy, Mission Disposal, for sponsoring the entire live stream. It's been awesome over the cold winter months. I hope everyone has stayed warm and safe in the icy, snowy conditions in our beloved Commonwealth and all through the mountain lands. It's been especially snowy and cold and dangerous. So thanks to our sponsors for keeping the lights on, keeping us warm, and building a brighter future. Before we get to our special guest in today's highlight, I just want to shout out to the Solar Work Group of Southwest Virginia. Folks are familiar with them. They appeared at the last virtual Solar Summit. You can go pull those awesome clips off of our YouTube channel, but they just relaunched their website. And those of you watching, you can see it here. Looks beautiful. They've organized a tremendous amount of information. It's kind of a great first place to go and get smart for folks. And they've got a great newsletter now. And you can see the website over there, swvasolar.org. So I hope everyone checks that out. And then a plug for our own stuff. The 2022 Virginia Solar Summit is coming to the historic Altria Theater in beautiful downtown Richmond, Virginia, April 27th and 28th, with pre-summit networking beginning the evening before, April 26th. We are exactly 3 months away today. We will be there for another immersive, illuminating, deep diving event with the region's best speakers, leaders in the public and private sector. And we are co-hosted again, fortunately, by the groups that you see there: Appalachian Voices, the West Virginia Brownfields Assistance Center at West Virginia University, Virginia Energy, formerly known as the Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy, and of course, Virginia DEQ, the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. Shout out to their Brownsfield group, one of the country's best. We thank them for the work they're doing every day to build our highest and best future. So hope to see everyone in Richmond in person again after winter has passed at the beautiful Altria Theater and other magnificent events. Some exciting rooftops I was checking out the other day. You can register now. Early bird rates are available at virginiasolarsummit.com. Okay, without further ado, let us get to our special guest today. Very excited to have Mr. David Peterson on. We had a lot of folks reaching out, wanting to get Mr. Peterson on. It took some wrangling with our schedules, but very fortunate to sneak it in. He's a very, very busy person. And let me introduce him and waste no more time. David came to Shine after years of experience in the arts, in nonprofits, in event promotion and production, as well as an entrepreneur. He started his own company, Seven Hills Presents, which he owned and operated for a decade before he sold it in 2017. In 2011, he also founded Project 324 to help bridge the arts funding gap in Virginia public schools, and he's also served on the boards of Connor's Heroes Foundation for childhood cancer research, as well as the University of Mary Washington Symphony Orchestra. He's an accomplished musician, and you might see in his background already, but his work in the education sector also included the Public Consulting Group. David's dedication to environmental issues and the climate crisis, along with his diverse skill set, project management, digital marketing background, strategic planning, he's a real Renaissance person, and he's reinvigorated Shine since coming on and leading its crucial catalytic work to expand the development of the solar workforce in Virginia. And Lord knows we need that now. As a Virginia Tech alum, you might have bumped into David or will be bumping into him at Lane Stadium or Castle Coliseum, rooting for his beloved alma mater. So big bio, David, but a diverse bio. And as a Renaissance person myself, tip of the cap. I appreciate your blend of experience. Thank you for your time. Welcome to the show, and congrats on your relatively new role at Shine.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Dan. That was a very generous welcome and introduction. I have to say, from now on, I'm far more eloquent when you're speaking on my behalf. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to just begin, I guess, kind of at the beginning. What did you study at Virginia Tech? And take us down your kind of career life story, if you can. How did you wind up at the tip of the spear at Shine, really, leading the vanguard of the bold, brave solar renaissance?
Yeah, it's been an interesting, what's that game? Chutes and Ladders?
Yes.
Maybe that's a decent metaphor for the career. I went to Tech from Florida. I lived in South Florida when I was younger, and went to Tech to play tennis and study biochemistry. And then about midway through spring semester of my freshman year, I started a band, and that somewhat changed the trajectory of both of those initiatives. My parents were not thrilled by that, but somehow I managed to turn it into a vocation and a professional track in that world, and worked in the music business and industry through the majority of my early career, and spent life on the road as a touring musician, and was able to achieve a certain amount of success. So that felt good. And when it was time to leave the stage, as it were, I didn't really intend to stay in music, but I had built some relationships on the sort of the business side of it, and I didn't, there's this wall that exists between people in the arts and people on the business world, and those in the arts sometimes can sort of mischaracterize what business is and what the ideals of business are. And so when I realized that I was not necessarily looking at the landscape as effectively or objectively as I could, I realized that there were some opportunities that I might enjoy in that space. And so I started a production and promotion company and did that for a decade or more. There's a concert series in Richmond called Innsbruck After Hours that I was involved in, and then a music venue called the National that is in Richmond that I was one of the guys that helped to bring online. And so through that experience, I was able to get a good sense of what it's like to run a business and wear a few hats and have to spin some plates on a daily basis. So when I was given an opportunity to trade on that knowledge, I got an offer to purchase the company, and I took it, and was given an opportunity to look around at things that might have an impact as well. And the expanse of renewable energy and our focus on the energy transition and the stakes, frankly, at play, brought me into this in a very passionate way.
Yeah, your passion is well known. You still have a lot of fans out there, I think. We've heard from them, and more recent fans of your solar work, and we're going to talk a lot more about that. But I appreciate what you're saying about your cross silo experience, spinning multiple plates, plates of different shapes on sticks, probably of different lengths.
Yeah.
My theory has always been looking at the music industry kind of from the outside in, but passionate about it in a different way, with some family members kind of in and out. Did you find the music space challenged you with some of the new challenges of the digital age early on? Napster came early. There was a lot of disruption in the music industry, and you were kind of in the middle of that and challenged by directly with new technology.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's been a while since I've had to ponder that that transition and how it happened. And now that I think about it, it's not tremendously dissimilar to the the transition in energy that we're going through, because when music became digitizable, when you could reduce it to zeros and ones, it became decommoditized. So you didn't have to go to Tower Records, or there was one called Peaches in Richmond, that that's what you did when you were a kid. You got your allowance, or you got paid from stocking shelves at the grocery, and you went and you bought a record, or you bought a tape, or you bought a CD, or in my case you bought all three. I don't know how many records I've bought three times in different media, but as the digital era started to loom larger, and I think you're right. It was Napster that when technology allowed for the transfer of larger quantities of data through frankly the air. When it was just that generation right past AOL and dial-up, that you've got mail, and when the next generation hit T1 or broadband, prior to broadband, but like there was the opportunity and ability to trade, to give somebody an entire album worth of music. And in Napster's case, they built a platform to allow you to do that. And that was a really, really interesting transition, because the music industry was, was frankly, they were not prepared for what they were about to see, and the degree to which the stranglehold they had on not only the creation and production and distribution of music, but the industry of music itself. I mean, like the whole vista of music as a career is sort of guarded, as gate kept by the recording industry. And the era of Napster brought about this tremendous de-siloing and this tremendous decommoditization of music, to the point that now anybody with it used to be a laptop, now it's a phone, and an interface, can record an album in their garage or in their bedroom or in their closet and put it out. And 3 million, 10 million, 20 million people can hear you. And you don't have to be signed by a label. You don't have to have any kind of promotional support or budget, which is all recoupable. So you don't have to pay it back. And it's turned that business model completely on its head. So, when you look at energy and the energy industry and the transition and the stage of it that we're in, I think there are a lot of similarities to the types of the mindset, perhaps, that purveyors of legacy fuels are in, and the kind of transition that they see and are trying to figure out how best to weather.
I love all that. I see a lot of parallels myself, and things are kind of rhyming. And to digress a little bit and build on this analogy, there was a lot of panic and fear, as we recall. Music, that curve kind of started first, and thought it was the end of music and all that. But I think looking now 20 years on, the music industry is bigger than ever. Profits are bigger than ever. And even though one of the most fascinating things, and I'm sorry this is off script, Mr. Peterson, but I think Spotify is up to 40,000 independent downloads a day now. So you're right, anybody with a phone can access the market, but in a strain, and people do, and they're putting out more than ever. But if we look at listens, people are listening to less than ever. And so I don't think if we could go back in time 20 years ago, we would say, oh, people will have more choices than ever, but select fewer. And the music industry would be making more money than they ever did. A lot of disruption in between now and then. Any thoughts on that?
It's a great point. Well, I think, again, it's also a pretty decent metaphor and fairly prescient view of how we could apply those realities to the energy industry also. Because you're right, back then, no one would have said the music industry is going to generate more revenue in 2022 than it did in 1998. No one would have believed you because it was a crater, and that hockey stick was pointing down. And what they did was they figured out how to create a new revenue model and capitalized on the fact that they had enough influence in the halls of Congress, and I think justifiably so, because intellectual property deserves to have value. Something that someone creates deserves, a copyright deserves to have value, just like a trademark or a patent deserves to have value. So I think the industry helped because it was in the business of saving itself, but they helped to usher in an era where artists could also reap the benefits of their efforts and the work that they generated. And that was one of the biggest concerns back then, was that this was going to dampen the impetus or the motivation for someone to get into arts as a career. Because even before Napster, it was not where you went if you wanted to bathe in money. But after that, it seemed like a real labor of love, and something that, we suffered for our art. But there was ingenuity at play, and necessity became the mother that invented the Spotify's and the Apple Music, and now we've got streaming. And if you read any of the prognosticators in that space, the future is really exciting for music.
Yeah, I see growth everywhere. It's a cornucopia of growth. We could go silo by silo. I want to start a whole nother podcast on the industrialization of space, but that's for another time. But it's a perfect segue, actually. I would love to transition and square you up on your day-to-day work, your efforts at Shine, which let me do that for you if I can. What is Shine? Shine is the solar hands-on instructional network of excellence. It is a public-private partnership founded by the Southside Virginia Community College, MDV SIA, which is now CHESA, and then an agglomeration of solar developers, construction companies, energy consulting and recruiting firms, and tech companies who saw the need early and came together to form this PVP. What is Shine's mission? Shine's mission is to develop a qualified, diverse, equitable, and inclusive solar workforce, to equip Virginians with the tools and knowledge to enter the solar sector and with a competitive edge, help solar developers and construction companies source qualified and trained talent, and bridge the gap between solar job supply and solar job demand. And let me give the website while we're here, shine.energy. David, how'd I do with that?
You win. Is there any way that I could get the recording of this so I can, that's my elevator pitch, and you just nailed it, pitch perfect.
Sure, we will get you this clip afterwards, and probably many pithy clips, I imagine, going forward. But tell me more about Shine's mission and the essential work that you're doing every day to bridge the gap between renewable power and people power.
Yeah, that's I think how you portrayed that and how you communicated it was very well done. We were founded in 2018 as the realities of project labor deficits in Virginia were becoming more clearly into focus. This was pre VCEA, so it goes to show you where we are now when you fast forward to now. But even back then, there was a tremendous need for local talent to handle the projects that were being executed and in the pipeline. And there was a lot of work had already been done, as most people know, in North Carolina. They were and remain, in terms of their build out, a few years ahead of us. But a lot of the laborers and folks that were helping to build the infrastructure in Virginia were coming from North Carolina down through Florida, out as far as Texas and Nevada and Arizona. And it's an industry that invites that kind of travel. But as we saw the need to try to help provide as much of a kind of a wraparound benefit to Virginia and Virginians for welcoming and inviting this development. And again, this is, we've got about 3.5 gigawatts of solar commissioned and in use in the Commonwealth today. And it's going to be 20, by 2033 or 4. So we're still really, really early in this transition, in this ramp up. But the folks that were, responsible for helping that 3 gigs come online were the ones in that vanguard wave. They were the ones that that we saw how the work was being done, the benefits and impact on the communities that were accepting and inviting it, and what those benefits perhaps could be, and how they could be better. So the initiative was really sort of, it was born of both sides, so that we have the opportunity to direct and propel the wages that come from this work into the communities of the people that are inviting it, and that boosts them, and it gives them a win and proper motivation to consider what they did in allowing the permitting and the project to move forward in their community, to see the benefit of it. So that's a big part, is helping the communities that are involved and willing to participate and want to see as much of the benefit as they possibly can. And that trickles through to the industry as well, because when you've got people within your community that are getting up and they go to sleep in their beds in their homes, 10, 15 miles away from the project, then you don't have to pay labor to come in and put them up in hotels and give them, meals and all the attendant stuff that comes with that. So there are two sort of cells on the spreadsheet that this helps. And one is obviously, your bottom line labor cost if you're a developer, and that trickles through to the rate that the folks are going to pay for their electricity, because in Virginia, all those costs become monetizable down the road. And also churn. So being able to bring in an equipped and properly educated and a workforce that knows what they're getting into and understands the job for what it is will be much more likely to succeed and move on and stay with the organization that they're with. So it really does. It's a win-win, the way I see it. And at the end of the day, it also it helps. I mean, we're at that rare moment of confluence that the social case and the business case for renewables are uniting, and they're meeting. And it's like, I like to say, it's like being in Pittsburgh, where you got the Allegheny and the Monongahela River joining to form the Ohio. And the social case and the business case for renewables are joining to form this transition that will benefit all of us in so many ways. It's obviously from levelized cost of energy perspectives and looking at it from a business and financial and economic point of view, and through that lens, it makes good sense. And it also might help keep us from frying ourselves and all of the other living things off our planet. So I see it as kind of a win-win.
Yes, saving the environmental case for last, and appreciate that. But no small footnote on the overwhelming case for renewable power. I think a lot of folks are really only seeing solar through the environmental perspective, and maybe that's a mistake because it is so broadly beneficial, as you mentioned. So, I think it would be really helpful for our audience. I want to get into all of the detailed work. We're a very substantive community, as you know, Mr. Peterson, and Shine's doing a lot of great analysis, and you provide tools and information. But if we could start maybe, because no one's more well-positioned than you, can you give us the current state of play in the kind of Virginia workshed? How do you see, the market right now kind of coming through COVID and all of the crosswinds that we've seen, economic, labor, and otherwise? How do you see, Virginia's solar workforce right now?
That's a great question, Dan. And there are so many different ways that you can look at it, you can approach it today. With the impact of COVID and the pandemic, not only on supply chains and production schedules and the way COVID has impacted industries across the economy and across the world, but also how it looks toward how project delays have been managed, and how labor shortages as a result of the Great Recession, or the Great Resignation, I should say, have impacted industries across the board as well. So the state of play is still on the trajectory that the VCEA set it on, and I think for better, much more than worse, the RPS and the standards that have become codified into law have set those wheels in motion. And once Dominion Energy and APCO and the larger companies build those into their 25-year outlook, they become kind of baked into the cake in terms of what we can expect to see. And that said, there are also stopgaps that the SCC has in place, and we've got a Republican government coming in, so that certainly provides a level of in music we like to say, "Don't you feel alive?" So I think we're gonna feel alive through that transition in a number of ways. But by and large, I think solar is on the trajectory that it was set upon in 2020, and the way the pandemic has influenced and affected it is more of a blip, because we're seeing, when we do, and this gives me a good opportunity to also talk about the analytics that we do, and the data analysis that's part also of Shine's mission, and one of, I think, our most important pillars, and that is we aggregate data from across a number of sources, public and not public, and we use that to create a set of visualizations and try to communicate that data to stakeholders in a way that they can develop actionable insights through it. So we call it the SPPA, or the Solar Project Pipeline Analysis, and we can include it in the show notes, and I'm happy to share it with anyone that's watching or listening today. But our goal is to be able to create a clearinghouse, a repository of the data regarding solar development throughout the state, in terms of the projects, where they're located, what stage of permitting they're in, how big they are, and that yields the outputs of how many jobs they're going to create, how much economic impact to the community they're going to generate, and through more inferencing that we do when they're going to come online, when we predict the production schedules to start, so that we can plan training in a way that the folks that come through the program get out and they've got a job waiting for them. And that's a big part of what we consider the value of the throughput of the program, is that when we train people through the community colleges throughout the state that we partner with, we want to make sure that if they graduate on Friday, they've got a job on Monday. and having those sort of off-ramp relationships with the industry is a big part of helping to become what I like to call an aligned intermediary, because ultimately that's what we are, and that's what we're trying to do. So in somewhat of a roundabout way, I think the state of play in Virginia is obviously dynamic and has been impacted by the pandemic in ways that we've all seen, but is poised to bounce back, I think, a lot better. Our current estimations for the next 4 years are upwards of 40,000 hires in solar at the specific SOC codes that we train for, which 472231 is the solar PV installation technician role that we're focusing on right now, because much of the work that's being done in these solar projects is the work of building them, and installing installing solar panels is the gig.
Yeah, a real gig, actually, making things and building things
Right.
with your hands in inclement weather. I'll come right back to that. But first, I just want to thank you for performing that kind of analytics, getting that information out there. I mean, that helps feed the market. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. We don't want to run in the dark with scissors with this kind of thing. And without the type of information discovery and publishing that Shine does, we would be somewhat in the dark. So let me plug it again. It's shine.energy. And the cool map that you guys have put together is shine.energy/maps.
Right.
So yeah, coming back, Virginia is the #1 state to do business back-to-back years in the CNBC Business Survey. One of the best territories to do business on the planet Earth. It's like the sucking sound in reverse. We've got all this money coming to Virginia from the EU and elsewhere. It's going to the port. It's coming into all these projects. And who's gonna do all this work? Like we're gonna need a lot of folks. I mean, how hard is it to place people? You just mentioned, getting finishing training on Friday, getting a position on Monday. Something I liked, some language we found on your website about the certifications. Let me ask you specifically about those. What are the certifications that you guys do provide? You kind of call it the construction arts equivalency.
Right.
The kind of hands-on training you guys are doing is great for folks, entering the solar space, but that might lead to something in construction or a lot of places right now, because as we know, we have more open positions, more jobs available right now than at any time in American history.
Well put. And that was, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about that, because one of the things that's really important to us, and one of the, when you deal with project-based initiatives, there are, whether you're building a hospital or a Walmart or a solar installation or a project, there's a date where the construction apparatus arrives, and there's a date when the construction apparatus leaves. So you've got the idea of a job that doesn't exist in perpetuity. So how we managed to address the very real concerns that, when we go to communities throughout the state and say these jobs are real, they're beneficial, and they have the potential to be enduring. And when we get to the part where they have the potential to be enduring, that's when someone who's done their homework and understands and knows says how, and they have a right to say how. How do these jobs become real jobs that can turn into real careers? And we've done a lot of thought and put a lot of energy behind how we turn the opportunity to enter the solar field and the renewable energy field and the energy field and the construction field through these avenues. And so what the training does is it gives people OSHA 10, which is the basic fundamental construction arts safety certification that's necessary for any job affiliated with the Dominion Energy Project, and frankly any job affiliated with a business that we want to do business with, because we don't want to associate with off-takers or industry stakeholders that aren't going to put safety and the culture of safety at a premium. It's incredibly important because these are, a lot of people think that there would be more risk building a nuclear plant than there would building a solar farm. But actually it's not that way. It's the opposite. There are a lot more ways you can hurt yourself building a solar farm. And that's just the nature of how that work is done. So the fact that we need people to be safe, we want people to be safe, and that's very important, is something that we can also use to kind of collateralize the training of the folks that come into the program. And so they learn basically what you would need to learn to be qualified to go from a solar project to the hospital that's being built down the street or across the county, or the Walmart that's being built, or the solar project that's being built in Pennsylvania or Ohio or Illinois, if you're young and you want to travel and you've got nothing holding you down. And I would recommend doing that before I would recommend getting into a band. So there are advantages, but the place we are in the lifespan of this industry and this technology and this moment is such that if you enter the field now with motivation to improve yourself and to grow, just like anybody entering any field should, the opportunities are huge. They're myriad, and they can take you all over the world, or they can take you right where you are. And that's the goal of our program, is to be able to give people opportunities to choose either. And we've put a lot of thought into what that outflow pipeline entails. So the Shine certification that is also communicated is we spent a lot of time and energy building that into a proven industry accepted standard certification, so that the avenues of funding through the VCCS, the Virginia Community College System, and various state organizations and also federal organizations having an accredited certification avails you and your students to be able to find funding opportunities that can make the program cost you little or nothing. And that's another big part of what of our goal, is that no one be denied the opportunity to enter this field because they don't have the cash to go to school for it.
I love it. It's giving somebody a car with gas in it. Here you go. And I beautifully stated too about the long arc of the career path. This is like the graduate 2.0. Benjamin, I want to have a word with you, just one word. It's not plastics. Yeah, it's solar. And solar will lead to so many other things, but just the pipeline we're looking at now, we've got terawatts on deck. And if the drone armies come and we electrify the transit grid, and every grandma has a maid bot at home, like on the Jetsons, in case she slips and falls, we're going to need a lot of electricity. So we might need even more power.
And not to interrupt you, but to be able to conceive of those means that they are in sort of our short-term vision. It's the stuff that we can't even think of, we can't even articulate about what grandma's bot's going to be able to do, and whether grandma's even going to need a bot. What's the next generation of that? And to what degree is electricity part of that narrative as well? And this all builds into something that, we've talked about prior, Dan, where we're headed, and where this, we see what we can conceive of is what I'm very confident is going to happen. What we can't conceive of is also something I'm very confident is going to happen. And that's going to be even more intensive for the work that we're doing right now. And we're dependent and reliant upon the foundations that we're building right now. And that's why it's so important.
Yeah, I stress to people all the time the urgency of the moment. The old projections are now in the pipeline. And it might be harder to look around the next corner, but these jobs are here. They're now. We've got billions and billions and billions of dollars in search of investment. We have more money out there than ever. We've had a lot of policy discussion on the live stream recently in politics, and we argue about debt and all that. and our debt keeps growing, but boy, the economy keeps growing too. And the global economy is bigger than ever. We had record growth reported this morning going back to 1984. So I see a lot of growth in the forecast. But before we get too big on larger questions of pipeline versus projections, let's zero in on Shine's nuts and bolts and how it's actually happening. You mentioned OSHA 10. I think you all offer 4 certifications, correct me if I'm wrong: the first aid, CPR, the basic course, NCCR core, and then NCCER solar systems installer. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Through your
So,
different,
and again, those are all stepping stones. One of the important things also, I think, we're in this really interesting moment in the transition of energy, but we're also in this really interesting moment in the transition of education and academia and what it means to be qualified, what work really means, what a job really means. And COVID has been an accelerant in a lot of ways, and there's been a lot of airtime given to the impact that the pandemic has had on life in general and all of the little ways that it's affected our lives. And it's also been, I think, a great accelerant in the shifts dynamically toward where the education system in America sits today and where it's headed. And higher education in particular is having a moment that I don't think a moment of reckoning is too strong a word to use. And in tandem with this great resignation is the sense that do I need 6 figures worth of student debt to embark upon the life I want to lead? Does that give me the life I want? Will that allow me the life I want? Is a profession or a vocation that involves using my hands something that does actually have value? Because those shop floor careers, those union jobs, as they used to call them, a lot of those carried with them almost a social stigma that people that weren't equipped with the kind of brains or intellect to go on to university would end up in that stream and in that pipeline and get a job like that. And they became second-class citizens. And as we move into this new era, I think it's high time that we revisit how we look at the value of those careers, those jobs, those positions, and those opportunities, because those are the opportunities to grow further and do more. Because every single, that one about the factory of the future is going to have 2 employees, a man and a dog, and the man's going to be there to feed the dog, and the dog's going to be there to bite the man if he touches anything. And that's where, a lot of, again, past grandma's robot era, we're looking at a measure of disruption of our world, such that the past is no longer prologue to the degree it was, and with the predictability that it has been. So reassessing the value of these kinds of jobs, of jobs that involve actually doing actual things for the good of actual people, those jobs are never going to go away. And at least not the way I see it. And I think society, it's time for us to place more emphasis and a higher station on what that life is, what that vocation is, and what it's worth to us as people.
Couldn't agree more. And I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to soapbox that, but it flowed.
Oh yeah, perfectly stated. And you're here for the soapbox, my friend. And I love it. It's so true. I think this is part of the Renaissance. Things are changing so quickly. Those old stigmas should die. These jobs take skills and talents. And I think the reality is that, for a lot of folks, you just don't need 4 years of university because you're a digital native. You've grown up with this. You don't know a world. You don't remember buying albums. You don't remember peaches. You don't remember waiting in line for things. And so they have an aptitude, I think, that's innate that previous generations haven't had, and lend themselves to
No,
a lot of these careers.
yeah. And let me clarify, Dan. I want to make sure that I don't come across as too disparaging of 4-year, elite educations, because this transition, we all know, it's going to need the PhDs in astrophysics and electrical engineering, and it's going to need the folks that get up every morning and go out and pull the plow, so to speak. There are across the whole landscape of educational background and professional acuity and acumen, it's going to be absolutely necessary to mobilize. This is an all hands on deck moment, and I know a lot of people that are here are the choir to whom we preach, but I think it still needs to be stated that the urgency of this, for any number of reasons, is such that we really need, this needs to be a Manhattan Project.
Yeah, it's hands-on, and I appreciate the play on words there with shine. It's all, it's very hands-on. I think it's kind of the spirit of the age. And, I'm in the camp, we just don't have enough people. I've noticed this for 10 years, whatever, we could pick a sector and we just don't have enough people anywhere. And so maybe someday it will be true that we'll out innovate humans, and there will just be, a man and a dog at the factory, but it ain't true yet. And it ain't even close to being true. We're going the wrong way. And I don't think you were overly harsh on 4-year universities. I mean, I went to college for 8 years. I got 3 degrees in that time. But that's a path. We're going to need everybody to pursue all paths, because it really does take a village, right? And many hands make little work. I could use many different adages from age-old wisdom. But before we get too far away, I wanted to ask. I had a question about NCCER versus NABCEP.
Yeah, they're some would say they're two sides of the same coin, and I tend to think that they both provide a very, very solid foundation to build upon. NABCEP is a little bit more broad sweeping in terms of the kind of skills and capabilities it focuses on. So as far as NABCEP goes, that remains, I think, what would be considered the gold standard in solar and in renewable energy certification, and they deserve that. NCCER has a little bit more range and applicability and functionality in areas where there's a wider range of skill sets being addressed and being looked at. NCCER doesn't focus simply on solar or electricity. It's construction arts in general, heavy equipment, all different kinds of trades are affiliated with NCCER in terms of the way they approach their certifications. So, our particular relationship with the community colleges puts that a little bit more elegantly into the NCCER space or world. But NABCEP is still very, very qualified, and a great certification to have, and a great road to go down.
Yeah, but I love the broad education that we mentioned before, the construction arts equivalency. I love the multiple certifications that you all offer. Something else you might consider maybe in the future, HAZWOPER training on the environmental side. That's relatively simple. You can get high school students to understand that, and college age folks. And I think as we're looking at, we talk a lot about redevelopment here at the Virginia Solar Summit, a lot of these brownfields, a lot of these old mine sites, and just the future, I think, of the environmental field is a race to the top. We'll see more and more as the science gets better. There's new emerging contaminants. We're finding, new mistakes from our industrial legacy that we're going to clean up in the future. And so we'll need a lot of HAZWOPER training. But can I zero you in on the trainings that you all offer? You guys do 2-week trainings. You do 2-day more intensive trainings. You go to the community colleges. You have a new mobile. Mobile? Tell me about all your actual trainings. I'm fascinated on how y'all roll the sleeves up.
we actually train people while they're rolling down the road on a flatbed semi. It's more like, again, real world type scenario. That's not true. That would be dangerous, very dangerous. But we do have a mobile lab that we set up, and we designed it and built it so that it can be used wherever it's needed. One of the things that one of the barriers to being able to bring training online quickly is how it's built into the firmament, into the ground. Educational centers and institutions are usually on public space, public land, and getting a hold of a couple hundred feet or a couple thousand square feet to put a lab can take a while. And one of the things that we ran into was the reality that if we wanted to scale this quickly, we're probably going to have to figure out how to do it in a way that the equipment can be mobile. So we designed a system that we can take on the road in a truck and set it up in a day, and it becomes a training lab for the solar installation technician job. And the 2-week training is, sorry, the 2-day training is something that we've, over the course of the pandemic, while we were forced to stay away from each other. And when you do a hands-on, face-to-face, practical application type training, not being able to be face-to-face makes it tough. So we took that opportunity to really dig into how we approached the transmission of the knowledge, and the curriculum design. And so we brought in folks from Dominion and some of the larger EPC companies and our industry partners, and said, how can we distill this into something that is sort of a quick strike? There's a term of art in the field that's becoming more prevalent, and it's straight to work, and how we can give people the skills they need in a way that does it efficiently, sufficiently elegantly, so that they have provable, repeatable skills and capacities and certifications that have value, but they don't take so long that, number one, somebody that's challenged to support themselves or a family during that period of time doesn't have to suffer from or be denied because of the time frame. And also, they can serve the needs of an industry that is way behind in the number of people that need to fill it, or it needs to inhabit. So this 2-day quick strike sort of, fast track boot camp is what the industry told us is really valuable to it. So that we can give them the skills they need, really inculcate an understanding of the culture of safety, of what it means to be safe, what the job entails from the day-to-day perspective, get them, again, certified in OSHA. They understand what it means to keep yourself safe and your buddy safe, and get out into the field and start earning money and continue to learn and gain experience, and then stack that knowledge and skill as one of the avenues to pursue after the project commissions and closes its doors and moves on. You can come back and go to and reskill in heavy equipment operation or some other attribute, or you can, again, apply to a community college for a 4-credit associate's degree, or an undergraduate degree, a bachelor's at a 4-year college, with the knowledge and the experience that you have. So the goal is to build this in a way that can be, abundantly stackable.
Yeah, and I wish we abundantly stackable. I think it is, and I wish we didn't have the stigma around retraining that we do. I think in the United States, like, I have to switch industries. In Germany, it's routine. A lot of continental, European countries, and in Asia too. Retraining is just, they don't even think about it. And I would say, my guess, having not gone through any of the Shine trainings myself, but anyone working in a coal facility today will find it easy and old hat to plug in and retrain and be on your way. I think there's a job waiting in the solar space for everyone working in carbon, certainly in coal.
There's no question. And so many of those capacities cross collateralize. So many of them are able, just like with life. I mean, how many skills and how much knowledge did you acquire through other areas of your life that you find useful on a day-to-day basis that you never thought you might need? It's very much like that in this field. What you learn and how you grow only feeds your further learning and growth.
Absolutely. So can we zero in even more on this? You know, the Biden administration, environmental justice is a passion of mine and something that I've made time for in my career. Nature boy growing up, old farm kid, family is still farming. But the Biden administration, they have the new Justice 40 initiative where they're targeting 40% of certain federal funding to go to underserved communities, environmental justice communities beset by legacy pollution and these things. And for me, I mean, I want to heal the land too as an old brownfield guy, but I would prefer to start with the people. We could start with taking the lead pipes out of homes. But I digress about that. But on workforce specifically, how is Shine squaring up, you know, on diversity, equity, and inclusion, targeting some of these communities and helping them get, as you said, straight to work?
Yeah, and that's one of the really sort of, again, I don't want to overuse the word elegant, but that is one of the things that really sort of falls into place nicely with our program and what we're doing, because what we found through our pilots that there's a high percentage of people that fall into those demographic categories of environmentally disadvantaged and ones that would benefit from the objectives that social and environmental justice carry with them, that it becomes in and of itself a social and environmental and economic justice initiative. And a lot of the folks there are also folks that are partner, sister groups of ours that are doing great work. Bridging the Gap is doing some phenomenal work. We've got an initiative that's gaining traction with the Department of Corrections to bring folks in and give them a head start on building a new life. A lot of the communities that the work is in places where there's a tremendous amount of disadvantaged population, and being able to bring opportunities to them when frankly there haven't been many over the last couple generations. So being able to be something that, and again, these are not opportunities that are sequestering people into different places. These are opportunities that for people to learn skills that they can take anywhere in the world with them. So that in and of itself has, it's the attributes of social, economic, and environmental justice that you just spoke of are sort of built into our DNA by the sort of the basic firmament of what this program does and how it was designed. And that also gives us the opportunity to seek out organizations that are anxious and designed to support organizations that focus on social, environmental, and economic justice and equity. So it's an avenue that we're fortunate enough to be able to access, because it's very, very much a big part of our mission.
Yeah, thank you so much for that and stepping into that gap. We need that catalyst in so many ways. The market is broken, quite literally. From a land use perspective, many of those brownfields are orphan sites, stranded, trapped in limbo for oftentimes decades, and there's no Starbucks coming. There's no high-end condos coming. Top of the hour, we are brought with the Virginia Solar Summit. We are a live stream. We are brought to you by Dominion Energy and Mission Disposal. I've just got a couple more questions for David. If you have questions, I know we have a small group joining us live today, but that's okay. If you have questions, go ahead, drop them in the chat. I'm going to ask David one more question, and then part of the deal of getting him on the show was that he got to ask me some questions. So we're going to go for bonus time in the next hour. We're going to open it up a little bit. We can talk bigger about carbon. We can wind it up. I'm not sure what he's going to ask me, but if you have a question, you can drop it in the chat now while we wait for those. David, let me ask you about getting kind of bridging right to what we were just talking about. What are the biggest challenges still on deck for workforce development and your workforce development initiative right now? And how can folks who are listening or watching help?
Thank you. It's a great question. And I think the biggest challenges that we see right now are fairly acutely related to the repercussions of coronavirus and the pandemic and what they did, the impact that they made on workforce and on jobs. And a lot of hay has been made over the 10 million jobs and the 10 million people without jobs, and the fact that that's not turning into a sort of a self-mollifying situation. So how, obviously structurally something is broken. That's about the only thing you can conclude is that something is broken. What? A lot of people have a lot of different opinions about what that is, but I think by and large, what we could use and what we would really benefit from is and we will benefit from the collective reassessment of what creates valuable skill and what work really means, and as our industry responds to the needs of the public at large, what we represent and what we do possess, I think we'll have a greater opportunity to more naturally fit and fill those voids. But when it comes to the folks that are listening and the folks that might hope to be able to to do something that makes a difference, a lot of it comes down to awareness and advocacy, which are fairly common sentiments in this space. But so much of where we are and what we do is kind of a who's from Whoville kind of mentality, where a lot of people don't know yet that these are the challenges. We had this, and it was a lot. It's a lot like when my wife and I had twins. They're 11 now, so almost 12. So they kick us out of the hospital, after 3 days, and they say, go home and you can have them. And so we drove home from the hospital, and I've got them in car seats, and somehow they survived the trip home, and we survived the trip home. And I picked the car seats up and I put them on the island in our kitchen, and my mother-in-law was thankfully, thank God, she was there. And I looked at her and I said, now what? And in a lot of ways, that's where we are with the VCEA, and that's where we are with the energy transition. And we've had the kumbaya moments, and we've been able to pop the corks in Virginia that a lot of this work, a lot of this, the hard work of getting an RPS standard codified and turning this into a measure that's for the public good is done in large measure. We still have to protect it, but a lot of the heavy lifting has been done. However, now the heavy working has to get done, and we've got to build the stuff, and that doesn't just happen. So the awareness of the opportunities and the jobs and the way that they're created, and building avenues to impassion and inspire those that will be carrying this torch after we're gone, and whose children will be carrying this torch after we're gone, I think is the most important thing. It's awareness in K-12, in CTE programs, throughout the educational environment, in Gen Z, in millennials, and God knows Gen X has had a chance, and they haven't quite blown it, but the clock is ticking. So we've got a lot of work to do in terms of telling the story in a compelling way that helps people understand. Standing up at, on your tiptoes and screaming idiot across the room isn't going to do it. It's not going to work. We need to help people understand why it matters to them, and for their kids.
Beautiful, Mr. Peterson. Loved every word of that, and I hope folks take it to heart. Yeah, the politics of outrage really isn't getting us anywhere, and distracting us from the very real and urgent work of the moment. I mean, these opportunities are real. We've hinted at many asymmetries in the system throughout this call. And our workforce disparity is one of them. The skills mismatch. It's shocking that we have over 10 million open jobs right now. And that number has been at a record for many years. I was on stage years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, talking about 7 million open jobs, 6 million open jobs. And going back to even universities, here in just not very long from now, we'll have twice as many females graduating as males. Which is great. I want as many, whoever wants to graduate should graduate, but that's an asymmetry. There's all kinds of, as such as a renaissance, we're figuring it out. Like we started out talking about the music business, and it gets scary sometimes. Life, I forget how you phrased it earlier, life is hard, life is scary. But it doesn't mean that the sun's not going to come up tomorrow, and it's not going to be full of sunshine and growth and potential. And I think folks are wrong. I've got children too, or one child and a dog. He's in kindergarten, and I do not believe, I didn't used to believe this, but I have come around to the view professionally, just in my work, that our best is yet to come. And folks who believe that the future is diminished and that our children will not have as high a quality of life as we have enjoyed, I think are just dead wrong. I think you talked about Gen X. I mean, we could go back to it's the boomers. It's all the boomers' fault. No, I don't want to channel Gen Z and just blame them. But they had such a peak, the post-World War II. It was so good and peaceful and easy, and just, the rest of the world was bombed out. Certainly boomers in North America, they have a very unique perspective. And yeah, they did almost eat the world. We could call them the locust generation, but sorry, Grandma, you're not a locust. We love you. We've made it this far. And you said the clock is ticking, David. I agree. But in the energy space, I think we all can say now, unfortunately, maybe thanks to the last carbon boom, fracking is leaving a lot of pollution stuck here, there, and everywhere. But the shot clock has reset. Still ticking, but we do have this time. I haven't seen any questions, but thank you for your work at Shine. My last kind of, before I let you take the count for a second, stepping in this gap. I mean, you really are, this is the difference, the delta of the future, how rosy will it be? Or if we mess it up, it's going to be because we don't invest in our people. We don't invest in education. We don't grab this low-hanging fruit and do the obvious things that we can do, and that, David, you are doing at Shine. Thank you.
Well, that's nice of you to say. And I definitely consider you to be a compatriot in the breach. So thank you for your company. And I would venture to say that most of the people that are tuned in and wanting to tune in to this conversation are like-minded. And there are a lot of, have had a lot of interaction with folks on the other side of the political spectrum lately, with the Youngkin administration coming in, and the way as some would say, the chairs on the deck of the Titanic are being rearranged, and there is a lot of energy, and no pun intended, and a lot of awareness and a lot of enthusiasm from some quarters in that space that gives me great optimism as well. That these are becoming shared values, and it's not perhaps the easiest road to get there, but we will. And to your point, and this I think will allow me a good opportunity to turn the table on you. From your perspective, what gives you that level of optimism that somebody would, you don't have to, as my grandfather would say, you don't have to swing a dead cat to to miss somebody that's not so optimistic about the future as relates to climate specifically. How do you see us climbing out of the hole we've dug ourselves?
Great question, and I'll answer. But first, let me give you one last opportunity to plug. Can you, and I had a specific question come across, can you give folks your website and way to contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's www.shine.energy, and I'm David at shine.energy, and I'm 804-307-8132. Just try not to text me at 3 o'clock in the morning. I got kids. They wake up at 5:30. They don't care when I went to bed. They don't care. Nobody told me about that.
Yeah, one of my boys' early nicknames was Rooster. I still call him Rooster sometimes. He gets up and crows.
Well,
Thank you. Okay, so thanks again to our robust live audience hanging in here. Bonus time. We may cut this now, so I promise I agreed that we would do this. You can ask me any other questions. We're opening it up now. To answer the one you asked, what is my source of optimism? I've got my team jokingly calls it the boom gospel. I have hundreds and hundreds of slides, and I could answer that in detail. I've made it a focus. It's been a focus of my work. Kind of as I've gone job to job, it's stayed in the foreground for numerous different reasons. And I get there as a pessimist. I get there being a problem solver and not just thinking, oh, we're gonna click our heels 3 times and it's all gonna be okay. I was raised on the land. I was raised with half a prepper, the memories of waiting for gas lines, waiting for gas in the 1970s and wearing sweaters in the White House and President Carter saying, turn your thermostat down. And those memories died hard. Again, the boomers, their parents, the generation of the Great Depression, the greatest generation, they never forgot the Great Depression. And so how do I get there? Well, it's I'm a hardware guy. I like to joke, and so I go piece by piece, the human machine on planet Earth, and sector by sector. And I think we now have solutions on board at scale, or that are scaling in each silo. You could follow up, and we could try to play Stump Me, which is a game I play sometimes. But let's start with food, which I'm passionate about in agriculture. Are we running out of food? No. The USDA is still paying farmers not to farm, but we grow enough food today to feed 16 billion people. So we're wasting 50% of the food that we have. If we didn't waste any food products, we could feed twice as many people as we have today. And now that doesn't even calculate farm waste.
Right.
That's not the entire value chain. So can we feed 8 billion, 9 billion, 10 billion people? I think actually quite easily, before we start talking about cultivating the sea, which some of our cousins in the wind space may be doing soon as they build offshore. Maybe we can do some artificial reefs. True blue field development is just not even come yet. We're barely better than our pastoral ancestors, domesticating guinea pigs and cows, to go back to our pre-call conversation. We're just raping the oceans. It's just hook them behind in huge nets. So obviously there's a lot of gains that we could make there. And I haven't even mentioned, of course, vertical farming. Professor de Pomelier, the Chinese are very serious about this. 85% of China is a desert. They have a absolute freshwater crisis. 90% of the freshwater that is in China is polluted. They have to grow things inside. We're going to grow things inside on Lunar Disney, up on the moon. We have that technology. We've had what's called CEA, controlled environment agriculture, for many decades. We're not even trying. So how much food can we grow indoors? Probably enough to feed 100 billion people. If we really tried, Mother Earth is super abundant. She's so big. There's so much water. There's so much elemental, chemical riches here, that we we lose sight of that. We get caught up in the game, competition for scarce resources, social Darwinism, and our very sophisticated, fast-moving lives, and we lose sight of the cornucopia that is Mother Earth. And anytime I forget about this, the mental game I play with myself is just imagine myself as one of my ancestors traveling forward in time and just looking around. Would they even be able to process the wonder? So that's my long-winded general, what I would consider very superficial answer to your big picture question.
I think that definitely helps to resonate. And again, the offer still stands for you to for you to call me every morning at 8:30 so that I can start my day on an up note, an optimistic first step. Because it does, I really think that it does take that kind of intentionality to keep like that. You know, who's the guy that got the Nobel for nudge theory a few years ago, and the idea that that we are very, very influenced by the little things that push us in one direction or another on our path. And you know, some could argue that that church on Sunday is a nudge toward a Christian life, a Christian lifestyle, and in a lot of ways, the way we affirm and create those intentions and that intentionality will drive how optimistic we are and how much faith we have in our future and our ability collectively to drive the future that we want to see. Because there are a lot of people that might say, yes, Dan, we can feed 16 billion people right now, but in 75 years, after the climate has done what it's going to do, that number might be lower. The desertification of what are now fertile crescents could happen. So, you know, again, I'm not trying to push back on that. I'm just saying it's easy to grow pessimistic over things like that. And like you, I totally believe that if we can't remain optimistic, then we might as well just throw in the towel. Because the easiest thing to do is to say, oh, we're overtime too. And we're not. The easiest thing to do, pardon my expression, is to say, fuck it, you know, and just go after hours. I'm going to get mine because this whole thing's going down the tubes anyway. And to remain optimistic and hopeful at the same time, because the two can exist independently and they can also exist in tandem. And what you represent to me is someone who exists within both the space of hopefulness and optimism. And it's also really, really motivating and inspiring because you're helping to do something about it. And that's a pretty big deal. So my next question.
Wait, can I respond? Will you forget?
Yeah, I was absolutely.
Sure. So yeah, I had to kind of break my way out of pessimism. You know, I was told like the world's going to end, you know, we're going to run out of stuff. And then as a young energy attorney, it seemed to be real. Oil went to $150 a barrel. And so my choice was kind of like, fuck it. We've got to do something, you know, or you know, are we going to go out like that? So, and some people do check out. I think it's pretty easy, you know, just play video games and we're spoiled rotten, you know. It's easy to kind of check out and do the minimum and still live a pretty good life, have air conditioning and a roof over your head. That's brand new. All of our ancestors had to work. Even if you were the laziest person in the tribe, you had to pull your weight, and that was a considerable lift. But you mentioned desertification. Well, we've got solar panels for that. So we know that the temperature delta above and below the panels can be as much as 60 or 70 degrees. And that's a really big deal in the Middle East. And some of our friends in Israel and elsewhere are very interested in the future of solar desertification. A little bit of not just that temperature delta, but a little bit of irrigation in that microclimate might go a pretty long way. So the future of the Sahara, some people talk about greening the Sahara. You can Google for that. Okay, and then you mentioned climate change too. You know, there's a lot of carbon in the atmosphere, but we're figuring out ways to suck that out. We still have time, you know, decades to make the cuts we need, and then the environment will take it out eventually. So once we go net zero, it's really just the timing game. Methane concerns me the most these days because of fracking. There's a lot of loose methane. That's 100x more global warming than CO2, but it lasts in the atmosphere less. We might have about a century of this kind of methane danger zone. But the nerd army sees this one coming. There's a lot of startups, a lot of carbon capture technology, artificial trees. But my favorite is, again, I try to think about the old school solutions, is we can just seed the oceans, because oceans are a desert, right? 90% of ocean life is along the coastlines and the reefs. So deep sea, we think about it like, oh, there's a lot of stuff out there. There kind of is, but it's really a desert. But if we go out and we can seed with micronutrients, particularly iron, if we just put iron out in the deep sea, that would cause little plankton booms, which would cause the ecosystems to blossom. And if we did that kind of on a global scale, we could get Mother Earth working for us to suck a lot of carbon out of the atmosphere through bioprocessing. And that's kind of, it's kind of out of the box thinking, but it's something we could do. It works. And maybe we owe the oceans that after centuries and millennia of raping and pillaging, because they're nowhere near their natural conditions. The very first explorers who talk about coming into the Chesapeake Bay describe being slowed down by the weight of fish in the water. There are more fish in the water of the Chesapeake Bay than there were fish. They talk about oysters and clams that outnumbered the rocks along the shores. And of course, we're restoring the Chesapeake these days, but we got a long, long way to go. And some of these things, there's a lot of synergies, and they'll work together, not just to take carbon out of the atmosphere, but to restore Mother Earth to her full, healthy potential. Okay, now, how is that? You can respond or ask me your next question.
Beautifully put. Yeah, I don't, my only response to that is that I totally agree that there are two ways that this statement can land when you say, I am optimistic that we will innovate ourselves out of this, because that's something you hear a lot from people who would rather not transition away from legacy fuels and their instruments because the urgency is not such that we can't innovate our way past it. But I think your approach, and like we talked about earlier, the grandma's robot is something we can think about. We can see that, but dumping hydrogen into the middle of or iron in the middle of the ocean, so that all of a sudden that cornucopia of sea life, of aquatic life, gets reborn. That's something that we don't see yet in our windshield. And when all that stuff that's coming in to our windshield and coming into our field of vision through innovation and technological advancement and the rise of that delta, of that second derivative of the rate of change of things, is if used appropriately and well, because we all know that every innovation has two uses, one for good and one for evil. And if we can make sure that those forces of good outweigh, and the impetus behind them outweigh the forces of evil, then we do have that shot, and we have an opportunity and a reason to be optimistic. How do you see? You're the kind of person that I love the idea of future casting with, because you're not afraid to look a couple down the chessboard. And when I think about industries like transportation and how the electrification of our life is going to be attendant to the transition toward the electrification of vehicles and such, and then the automation of vehicles, and how our transportation becomes essentially immune to the vagaries of human control and interaction, hopefully for the better. How do you see the transportation sector being impacted by the energy transition, and to what degree like at what point do you think we'll kind of level into the next generation of what transportation looks like?
Really great question. And I have a few toes in transit, not my direct field, but it's really trickling into real estate, which is where it gets interesting for me. You know, we have large real estate owners, landowners already thinking about, you know, the future of our built environment. And electrification is a good catch-all term, but it's getting very specific, driven from numerous different innovations, one of which is flying cars, which, you know, sounds funny, and it's not really in folks' windshield, but it's out there. Uber Elevate is a conference that's gone on for numerous years now, and that's just Uber, one conference about flying cars. That's always been their vision, was flying electric taxis. There's a tremendous amount of planning that's been going on for a decade, building us up to that. The FAA is working on, you know, new rules of the sky roads right now, and there's folks thinking about which of my high-rise buildings can we retrofit hanging helipads on for executive entrances up on the 40th floor. I think, you know, we'll see history rhyme. We'll see executives going back to white picket fences, those who can afford it. You know, in Chicago, it's about 40 miles from downtown, the Loop area, to Elburn, the last train stop, and there'll be folks who do that again. But I think that will start at the top and trickle out. I think we're going to pivot beyond flying cars, regular cars, the electrification of everything, more fleet models. Right, Uber will have just huge fleets. Ownership's already on the decline. I think it's going to take maybe 10 years to get to the next phase, maybe, as you might have been thinking about it, or 15 years. Some of these things are regulation dependent, but the technology continues to improve. AI will help. Smart cities and sensors will help. But, you know, Tesla's doing pretty well just with the onboard sensors that they have. But I think the Internet of Things and a lot of these technologies are coming together to make it very real and possible and safer for people, which is maybe the last gap. You know, does somebody want to get into a car that's driven by AI in 10 years? Maybe in 10 years it will be, right? The AI, no matter how fast you're going to the AI, it's like Pong. It's like it sees, you know, it thinks much faster than we do. So I hope that's helpful color. I do think transit is one of these very vibrant spaces of innovation. Not everything's going to work out, but it's going to become very local. It's going to become real estate. We're going to need, I can't tell you what the future of flying cars is going to be, or a lot of transit, but there's going to be more of it with more options. It should be seamless. We're going to have to start planning for pedestrians more, because it's going to be how pedestrians ingress and egress from these new forms of transit. And so a term that I really like to think about in my work is pedestrian-oriented development. We've been doing transit-oriented development, and that's good, but I think the next generation is really putting the pedestrian first, and maybe reverse engineering from that, and that will lead to some things in our built environment. People are already redesigning their residential developments and some of their commercial buildings there's new Uber lanes, and some of these things are going to be easier than we think, but we're going to have to tear up some concrete and put in some new forms in our built environment. But to come back to bridge this answer to the last question about innovation and this kind of idea that, oh, you know, you go to the church of technocracy, like we're just going to innovate. I would say, underscoring my argument, and really what pulled me out of the cult of pessimism, was that realizing that we don't need any more patents. Not really. Not for the bottlenecks that we're looking, not for the ones that are on deck for the next 20, 30 years in energy, in industry. We already have a logistics boom, Amazon, communications technology. COVID we had a medical revolution. We've got, you know, the DNA is all mapped out. A lot of therapies were coming online before COVID. Now we've had billions and billions and billions in medical spending. All these things are kind of happening at the same time. And I just see a lot of growth in the forecast, even if we don't have any more patents. But of course, the patents will come.
I might buy a couple battery chemistry patents if they become available over the course of the next 5 or 10 years. But barring that, I think you're right. a lot of the innovation, a lot of the groundwork to get us to that next phase. And to me, the next phase is where we have the luxury of moving our gaze, of shifting our gaze from the urgency that climate represents. And obviously we'll be able to tackle a lot of things in tandem, and a lot of that, a lot of the energy that goes, just like a lot of military technology ends up transforming civilian life. And in the same way, a lot of the innovation directed at solving problems like climate are going to have applicability, and you mentioned this earlier, far and wide, beyond simply keeping our planet from heating past a certain level. Is there any one technology, and then I'll let you go, because you've been very kind to honor me this time. Is there any technology that you see that's employable in the near term, in the next 5-10 years, that you think is going to be significantly disruptive in the same way that cellular technology has become disruptive to the transfer of information and knowledge?
Great question. And I'll start by going back to something you said during the main body of our chat about the unpredictability of innovation. Picking one of my favorite technologies from the past, you mentioned the military, GPS. GPS was not obvious to military planners at the time. I mean, they knew better than anybody where they were on the map. And it was just some kind of crazy idea, like, oh no, if we digitize global positioning satellite system, it'll be even better. There was some resistance. It wasn't obvious how revolutionary GPS would be so many years later. Now we're using it for everything. And so I think that there are a lot of those innovations that are going to sneak up on us. I don't know. The nerd army is bigger than ever. There's more scientists and engineers alive and working today than have ever existed if we added them all up throughout all of human history combined. So the nerd army is literally bigger than ever by orders of magnitude. And I don't really know, but I can give you, my favorite answers, or my favorite technology to answer your question. I don't know if I can pick one. I'll start with, I think the most commercial technology, I think, is going to be recyclable rockets. I think what SpaceX has done, we've talked a lot about Elon really in the background, Tesla, the electrification of transit, the battery race. But I think more significant than all that, and harder from a technical perspective, is the recycled rocket. It's really, people did not think it was possible, but they have managed to do it. And when the big one goes up this month, I think, to orbit for the first time, Starship Heavy, it will be the largest, most powerful rocket ever built, fully recyclable, delivering 100 tons of payload to orbit. That's as much as a 747. The cost will come down from, the shuttle was about $25,000 per pound to launch something into orbit. Starship Heavy will be about $2,500 per pound. So that's an order of magnitude gain, and it will come down a little bit from there. And so as a student of economic history, shout out University of Illinois, I don't know what the future holds, but I can tell you that in the past, when transit has seen orders of magnitude gains, big things have happened. And so maybe if we're searching for a metaphor or an analogy historically, I mean, this is maybe like inventing trains to space, the way we crisscross America. Imagine America without trains. So this is maybe an 1815 moment, 1820s, and it's very hard. I see it coming online. Flights will begin. I know Disney's talking about, Disney Lunar. And if that sounds crazy, they spent $1 billion to build, Disney Princess. And how many of those do they have? They got 10 of those. If you don't think they'll spend $1 billion to build a space hotel, you're crazy. I've sat in some of those meetings. And that will cascade literally to everything. Almost like Columbus, this is 1490. It's a 1491 moment. I can make a lot of historical analogies. But going up in space is going to change everything. There's 1,200 space startups in the Valley already. Gravity messes everything up. You can grow things differently in space. A lot of them have medical applications. So they're going to be, David, going back to what you were saying about factories with a man and a dog, they will be, a lot of them, micro manufacturing facilities with no people at all, where they're just going to go up and leave the bacteria, and they'll come up every 3 months, change it out, and bring this stuff back down and cure cancer or whatever it's going to be. A lot of other micro manufacturing things. So if I put one thing that would change the entire economy, it's definitely the industrialization of space, which I think has begun meaningfully. We got a billionaire space race. People are mad about it right now, but this is exactly what I think the world needs to see, because the real danger, Thomas Malthus could have been right. Maybe we would, if it was a planet in a bottle, maybe we would run out of stuff eventually, and I would be wrong someday. But boy, we're about to tap the natural resources of the entire cosmos, and there's a lot of stuff up there, and no spotted owls that we have found yet. And so Jeff Bezos's long-term dream is getting to 1 trillion humans. You can find him talking about that, with 1,000 Einsteins and 1,000 Beethovens walking around at the same time. And where the Earth, all heavy industry has been off-worlded, and the Earth is basically reduced to forest preserves and a few light residential developments and some coffee shops. That's it. Everybody, everything is basically off-world. That seems pretty far out. But
well, I want to win the stay lottery, at that point.
Well, yeah, there may be a tax, right? To do your 2,500, you may have to get a visa to visit, the pristine Earth. We don't really know. But I can tell you that's begun. We may have people on Mars in 3 years, in 2025. If everything goes right and we hit that Hohmann window, we could have a manned mission to Mars, a human mission to Mars by 2025 or 2030 at the latest. But what gives me, if I could, I know that was a long answer, but sticking in space, I have to. I think astronomy's most exciting decade is before us, thanks to the James Webb Telescope, which was recently launched. It just came into its final position on the far side of the moon in the last 24 hours or so. And it's caught a lot of popular attention recently in press. Oh, it sees back in time, and it's 100 times more powerful than the Hubble telescope. All true, but it can also see infrared, which Hubble could not see. And the critical difference, what that means is basically we're going to be able to zoom in on these exoplanets now that we've been finding, the little planets around neighboring stars, and detect their atmospheric compositions, or see it, because atoms knock out light spectrum. And so we look at the gaps, it's like having missing teeth, and we'll be able to see, oh, you've got oxygen and carbon. And that sounds really cool. But why is that exciting? Because scientists, the only thing that we know that makes oxygen and methane and a few other things in large volume is life. And so our official star charting is about to begin. And the very first time we detect an oxygen-rich atmosphere, scientists all around the world are going to lose their minds. But the James Webb Telescope will go on. We could find hundreds, we could find thousands, or we will, and we're going to start to catalog them. And I think that is one other factor that's really going to knock this glass ceiling off of Mother Earth, that we are no longer a ship in a bottle. And that's, for me, the ultimate shot clock reset. It's the never-ending shot clock. It's our destiny, I hope.
I wonder how long it'll take before people start selling property deeds to land in those places that have signs of life.
I think it's begun. You can go get like a deed of the moon and things like that. How official that is, I don't know. We're still pretty old school. There's a lot of innovation that's going to have to happen. Law of the sea and all that. Might be space pirates someday, and who knows.
You need a flag. You got to plant the flag too. It's really the only way to claim it. Well, that is fascinating. I for one am nominating you to start the book club that that I and my colleagues, not only at Sean but at VEWC, follow closely. And that's another thing that this VEWC part of how it fits into this narrative is something that I'm really excited to bring into a conversation like this and to a forum like this. My counterpart over there is Latoya Asia, is amazing, and she's somebody that I'm looking forward to bringing into this discussion.
Well, thank you, David. I'm very appreciative of your time today. Thank you for your questions and your interest in the future. I'm glad we've had have a handful of folks that are still sticking around listening to us. So I know it'll replay very well too. Thank you, Scott, for your reference to Mr. Scott Corwin referencing that George Jetson was born in 2022. Right?
Scott Corwin, it's good to see your face. Is that true? Is Jetson 2022?
That's what Google says.
Well, I gotta believe it.
We're going with it. Yeah. Well, I hope, I hope my boy is, Captain Kirk. I mean, this is the generation we can raise. We can do it in a generation. I'm not a software guy. I know we got a lot of software problems. They've hacked our limbic systems and social media, and I do see some long tail risks there. But also, we could solve some of those problems in a single generation if we just educated our fucking children. Excuse my French.
If there were more Dan Frenches and Scott Corwins around, I think we'd have a much better chance.
Well, there's more of us than ever. That's the good news, including you, David. And I mean it. Really appreciate the work that you're doing. It's so vital. You do have a lot of fans. Folks insisted that we get you on the live stream. I'm really glad that we did it. That you could take time for us. And I'll see you in Richmond. We'll be down. We're going to continue to draw a circle around these workforce issues until they're fixed. And well, that hopefully that happens soon. But I don't see that. We've been featuring this issue. We're going to keep focused on it. And we'll have to get you up on the big stage on your colleague as well at the Altria Theater, April 27th and 28th.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and to have this discussion. And I always leave discussions like this thankful that I was able to learn as much through it as I was. So thank you for your wonderful moderation. And again, I want you to start that book club. I'll be the first member.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate it. I have a lot of fun doing what I do, but we'll see. They had to talk me into doing the last virtual summit. They had to talk me into doing the live stream. They didn't have to talk me into Richmond though, because I love to be in person. That's where the real magic happens. And I'm looking forward to clinking glasses and having cheers, shaking hands again. I think Omicron is going to burn through. This will be the last winter of discontent, and spring shall come again.
Amen. Perfect way to leave it. Perfect.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, David. Keep up the good work. And thanks to our live audience who's still sticking around. You can rewatch this on our YouTube channel, and stay tuned for more at virginiasolarsummit.com. Keep up the good work. The future